Evening, everybody. I am Jebaroja Singh and very pleased and privileged to welcome you today to this wonderful event. I am right now seated on the traditional land of the Seneca Nation, the keepers of the Western Door, and the original peoples of the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. A very good morning to those in India and especially to Mr. Pawar, who woke up at 4:30 a.m. this morning, and a very good evening to all in the US and greetings to all in other parts of the globe. A very special greeting to our esteemed panelists today, Dr. Cornel West and Mr. J.B. Pawar. And as I said, I'm Jebaroja Suganthy-Singh, co-founder of Dalit Solidarity Forum, and I also teach in the Department of Sociology in Rochester, New York. Today, we have several organizations here who are co-sponsors of this event, along with Dalit Solidarity Forum and India Civil Watch International, the primary organizers of this event. And all of us here today as co-sponsors are actively dedicated as a diasporic collaboration to build an anti-caste, anti-racist, and anti-Islamophobic society. I call upon our Solidarity community members to introduce their respective organizations. We'll start with Acre.
Thanks, Roja. Hi, everyone. I'm Vasudan, the political director at the Action Center on Race and the Economy, and we're a national organization that campaigns at the intersection of Wall Street accountability and racial justice. One of our projects focuses on Islamophobia and how it fuels militarism and imperialism, and how Zionism and Hindutva both contribute to Islamophobia. Honored to be here with you all.
AIC, is anybody here? Yeah. If not, we'll move to whoever's here. Boston Study Group.
Yeah, this Hemant here. Good evening to everyone. And Jai Bhim. Thank you, Rosa ji, for doing this. And Boston Study Group is very glad to participate in this webinar. And it seems to be a very good, powerful speakers for this panel. So the Boston Study Group is an non-profit Ambedkarite organization based in the New England area. We also conduct a lot of Ambedkar lecture series, which is our, right now we are doing it online. We did almost like more than 70 lecture series since its inception. Boston Study Group was part of the Brandeis University started that conference. So we also partnered with the Brandeis University for 3-4 years now. Recently, we also launched our digital magazine called as The Awakened. So that magazine is basically, we are trying to reach out to all the Ambedkarite diaspora in the North America and over the globe. And so that we can have our own literature from the Ambedkarite organization. Yeah. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you, Hemant. Who else is here? How about Sunita?
Thank you, everybody. Roja. I'm Sunita from Hindus for Human Rights, Jai Bhim, everybody. We are a US-based progressive and inclusive Hindu organization building a Hindu society and practice, which is centered in love, peace, and justice for all, and standing resolutely for the annihilation of caste and the defeat of the hateful ideology of Hindutva. We make sure to raise the issue of caste and caste discrimination in all the work we do in the Hindu community. And we build close partnerships with Dalit activists and organizations whenever possible, offering ourselves as allies and deferring to their leadership in the justice work we do together. And we're also deeply committed to racial justice work. We challenge the Indian and Hindu American community to examine and acknowledge the debt we owe to the civil rights movement. We wouldn't be here in the United States enjoying the rights we enjoy were it not for the immeasurable sacrifices made by civil rights movement leaders. And if we enjoy civil rights as a minority in the United States, we must ensure that minorities in India and minorities everywhere enjoy their civil rights. And so we're honored to be a co-sponsor of this important event, which falls on the 97th birthday anniversary of Malcolm X. And we're inspired by this commitment to integrating justice work and his Muslim faith. And we aspire to do the same in our Hindu community.
Thank you, Sunita. Ambedkar King Study Circle could not be here. Karthik is working, so I'm just going to rep them. Ambedkar King, meaning Ambedkar and Martin Luther King Study Circle, was started in October 2016. And the aim is to challenge caste, class, race, gender, and religious oppression and oppressors on ideological, political, and social fronts. And their aim and strategy is to educate, organize, and agitate. And they have been forefront in fighting caste-based violence in the United States. I call upon David for DSF.
Hi, I'm David Amdahl, and I'm a board member of the Dalit Solidarity Forum. The Dalit Solidarity Forum USA was founded to provide visibility to the discrimination faced by Indian Dalits. Treated as literal outcasts by the rest of the Indian population, Dalits are systematically faced with issues of poverty, degradation, and violence. Dalit Solidarity Forum strongly believes that caste-based discrimination is a human rights violation. The mission of Dalit Solidarity Forum is to provide international visibility to the violation of human rights against Dalit communities globally, to network with Dalit leaders to bring about policy changes that secure equal rights for Dalits, to promote recognition of the cultural and historical significance of Dalit communities, and to promote education, policy changes, and movement towards self-sufficiency among Dalit communities. Dalit Solidarity Forum has, since its inception, worked closely with Dalit leaders in India to support and endorse policy changes in order to uplift Dalits economically, culturally, and socially. Dalit Solidarity Forum strongly identifies education as a key to creating social and economic viability for Dalits.
Thank you, David. I call upon ICWI, Sirisha.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. India Civil Watch, or ICWI, is a non-sectarian, left diasporic, membership-based organization based in North America. ICWI supports social movements and political resistance to some very deeply concerning events that are unfolding in India, and it also challenges supremacist, exploitative, and oppressive forces in North America. So ICWI locates itself in the long histories of struggles in India and North America against gender inequities, caste oppression, religious persecution, majoritarian violence, economic inequality, and state repression. And ICWI is committed to building a radical and just democracy in India, North America, and elsewhere. So we welcome Dr. Cornel West and Pawar, Mr. Pawar, stalwarts who have done so much to expand our imagination on the political possibilities for resistance, vision for a just world, and just how to show up in solidarity with different struggles. So, really glad to co-sponsor this and welcome to all the speakers and all the participants.
Thank you so much, Sirisha. I call upon Anil.
Hi, Jai Bhim, everyone. This is Anil Wagde representing Ambedkar International Center. Ambedkar International Center provides a platform as an organization as a support group for the caste violence victims. It intends to make interventions in recognizing caste as a discriminatory criteria so that it doesn't take root in United States, and it intends to make interventions wherever possible, both in terms of policy or legal, to make sure that the caste discrimination is recognized as such. And the Ambedkar International Center will provide support to victims of caste violence both in India and US. Thank you for inviting us to join this. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil, for your support. IAMC is not here. Rashid Bhai was supposed to be here. Sunita, do you mind introducing just in a couple of sentences what IAMC is?
Yeah, Indian American Muslim Council is a 30-year-old, I think the oldest Indian Muslim American advocacy organization. And they have I'm making this up, something like 18 or more chapters all around the country. And so on the one hand, they do advocacy against Islamophobia in this country and even more in India. And then they also do base building. So they very much, bring the community together in each city where they have a chapter to, educate and mobilize Muslim Americans to do protests and advocacy whenever needed. And they also, as we all know, partner with all of us together in social justice work and human rights struggles of non-Muslim communities also under threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sunita, for that. Vasudha, you introduced ACRE already, right? Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. Before we actually launch our wonderful celebration of the 97th birth anniversary of Malcolm X and the 50th anniversary of the birth of the Dalit Panthers, I invite us to observe a moment of silence to remember the departed souls in Buffalo, New York on May 14th, 2022, due to racial violence. Let's pause for 30 seconds. We remember Roberta Drury, Marcus Morrison, Andre McNeil, Aaron Salter, Geraldine Thaley, Celestine Cheney, Hayward Patterson, Catherine Massey, and Pearl Young, and Ruth Whitfield. As an international community, we stand with the families of all these departed souls. All right, so as we enter into our program today, our overarching theme today will be the imminent need to build solidarity across all socially and politically constructed identities, because we ought to care for and with one another. So discussions will and could address injustice against all minority groups in India and the United States, inclusive of all gender identities and sexualities. I invite Pranay to play some introductory videos on the Dalit Panther movement on Mr. Malcolm X.
1972, India's 25th year of independence. Then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's call for celebrations was in sharp contrast to the Ilaya Perumal Committee report in Parliament, which revealed the shocking extent of atrocities against Dalits across the country. The Dalit Panthers emerged as a reaction to this violence inflicted by the upper castes and injustice meted out by the state. World over, it was a period of ferment. The Vietnam War, Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement in the US, and our own Naxalbari movement. Taking their cue from the Black Panther movement in the US, a group of writers and poets in Mumbai, Namdev Dhasal, J.B. Pawar, Raja Dhale, and Arjun Dangle, came together to form the Dalit Panther.
We formed the Dalit Panther on the basis of Black Panther. Black Panther was that time very aggressive movement in America and South Africa. Many of those leaders, they were behind the bars. When we have started Dalit Panther, Black Panther almost all, it was finished. Some of us, like Raya Dale, Namdev Dhasal, we were writers. We were writing that we should fight for our people to fight against the atrocity. But in the year 1970, if you find every day there was some atrocity cases. So we decided why only to write only, why we should not come into the street. And accordingly, we have decided to form some organization who can fight for the upliftment or the atrocity against the Dalit. So this Dalit Panther organization was formed on 29th May 1972 in the street itself.
The Republican Party of India, set up by Babasaheb Ambedkar, had split into many factions after his death and had a pro-Congress slant. But the youth were attracted to the Panthers for their militant and aggressive stance towards caste atrocities, which were quite rampant at the time, just like now. Besides lynching and murders, 2 Dalit women were paraded naked for drawing water from a well in Maharashtra's Parmani district. On 12th August 1972, Ramdas Narnavre, a Dalit farmer in Nagpur, was brutally murdered by caste Hindus to appease the goddess. Condemning the atrocities, marches and rallies were organized in Mumbai by the Panthers. Raja Dhale's article pointing out that disrespecting the national flag attracted more stringent punishment than disrobing a Dalit woman stoked the flames of rebellion in many Dalit youths across Maharashtra.
Malcolm X's strident critique of the nonviolent philosophy of the civil rights movement sowed the seeds for the flowering of Black nationalism in the second half of the 1960s. Malcolm spent his youth in northern and Midwestern cities, but he was profoundly transformed in prison when he joined the Nation of Islam, a religious movement led by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It combined Black nationalism with the Islamic faith and embraced the concept of Black self-defense.
Malcolm X realized that while Martin Luther King was preaching nonviolence and peace, you had to send a message. He was a warrior, he was a general, and they feared him.
Malcolm encouraged his followers to achieve empowerment
by any means necessary. We intend to fire our people up so much until if they can't have their equal share in the house, they'll burn it down.
Dr. King felt that Malcolm's talk of violence was counterproductive and ultimately would, quote, reap nothing but grief.
The Negroes themselves should take whatever steps necessary to defend themselves.
Malcolm X's influence was profound in terms of the way African Americans looked at themselves and the way that the nation began to look at them. It called for Black dignity, Black self-respect.
Malcolm was adamant that words associated with slavery, such as Negro and colored, should be discarded for Black and Afro-American. His theories and his philosophy formed the foundation of the ideology of Black power.
Malcolm X is the key common denominator for all Black power activism. They use his speeches, they use his political thought, both in the Nation of Islam and outside of the Nation of Islam, as a sort of blueprint or framework for their own political activism.
The tensions that had been building between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm reached a breaking point after Malcolm made a controversial comment following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, leading to a bitter split. Facing the spiritual crisis, Malcolm turned inward, dedicating much of his time to learning more about his faith, including undertaking the Muslims' sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. Tragically, members of the Nation of Islam would assassinate Malcolm before his new philosophy could gain momentum. But his autobiography would become a key text of the Black Revolution, and it remains a key part of the American literary canon today. From Chuck D of Public Enemy to President Barack Obama, Malcolm X's bold and resonant voice has inspired generations to fight the power. Through his writings and speeches, Malcolm's message to Black people to take control of their own destiny lives on.
Thank you, Pranay. So I call upon little Sarah Rathod, who I call as our little budding social activist. Sarah Rathod is in 8th grade in Amherst Middle School, who will read to us from the words of Mr. Malcolm X.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, Sarah.
So, as you probably know, I'll be reading Malcolm X. So, words of Mr. Malcolm X, whose 97th birthday we celebrate today. Our color became a chain, a psychological chain. Our African blood became a prison because we were ashamed of it. We felt trapped because our skin was Black, because we had African blood in our veins. This is how you imprisoned us. Not just bringing us over here and making us slaves, but the image that you created of our motherland and the image that you created of our people on that continent was a trap, was a prison, was a chain, was the worst form of slavery that has ever been invented by a so-called civilized race and a civilized nation since the beginning of the world. I know right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. Revolutions are fought to get control of land, to remove the absentees, landlords, and gain control of the land and the institutions that flow from the land. The Black man has been in a very low condition because he has had no control whatsoever on any land. He has been a beggar economically, politically, and socially, a beggar even when it comes to get some education. So you have a people today who not only know what they want, but also know what they are supposed to have. And they themselves are creating another generation that is coming up that not only will know what it wants and what it should have, but also will be ready and willing to do whatever it's necessary to see that they should have materialized immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So beautifully read. Thank you so much. I call upon Ms. Umi Diop, who is a student at St. John Fisher College studying psychology and minoring in women and gender studies, who will read to us the words of Dr. Ambedkar.
Hi, my name is Umi. I'll read a little quote from Dr. Ambedkar. So here we go. He said, "I knew that I was untouchable and we were subject to certain indignities and discrimination. In the school, I was to sit in the corner by myself. I was to have a separate piece of granny cloth for me squat on in the classroom, and the servant employed to clean the school would not touch it. Children of the touchable classes could go out to the water tap, open it, and quench their thirst. But my position was separate. I could not touch the tap, and unless it was opened for me by a touchable person, it was not possible for me to quench my thirst." He also said, "In the absence of company of human beings, I sought the company of books, and I read and read. Absorbed in reading, I forgot my lonely condition. In ideal society, there should be many interests consciously communicated and shared. There should be very and free point of contact with other modes of association. In other words, there should be social endosmosis. This fraternity, which is only another name for democracy. Democracy is not merely a form of government. It is primarily a mode of associated living, of conjoint communicated experience. It is essentially an attitude of respect and reverence to our fellow women." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Umi. So powerfully read. Thank you. I now call upon Mr. Vikas Thatid, who is from Maharashtra, the state of Dr. Ambedkar, who's doing his master's in international and comparative education in Columbia, where Dr. Ambedkar studied as well. So I call upon him to introduce Mr. J.B. Pawar.
Thank you, Rosa. Jai Bhim to all, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are located. So in the quick introduction of J.B. Pawar, so he's a co-founder of Dalit Panther, Ambedkarite writer, scholar of Ambedkarite movement, commentator, thinker, and historian. He has published more than 30 books. Most prominent books are like Dalit Panther and Authoritative History, Ambedkarite Movement After Ambedkar, poetry collection on named Blockage. Recently, he published an article which is the history on Marathi Ambedkarite literature, which was published in Forward Press in 2019. Along with this, he holds two world record. First is editing more than 500 Ambedkarite poems. And second one is like, since he's working 16 years, he's only the person who used Dr. Ambedkar quotation while writing. And he initiated that process, and that is one of the award, is the world record. And so these are some few from his drop from the ocean of his contribution to the Ambedkarite movement and the community. And yeah, here I think that's it. And we have lots of things to say about him, but I'll just stop here. Thank you. Welcome, J.B. Pawar, sir.
Thank you, Vikas, and welcome indeed, Mr. J.V. Pawar. I call upon Reverend Dr. Evangeline Anderson Rajkumar, who's a Dalit feminist theologian from Indiana, to introduce Dr. West.
It is my joy and privilege to introduce Dr. Cornel West, who is a stalwart of the Black movement in the United States and a global revolutionary voice calling for action against all forms of injustice that devours human dignity. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, this American philosopher, scholar of African American studies, and political activist is acclaimed as America's public intellectual. Since his youth, the Black Panther movement was influential in his life in learning about the need for political activism, and his faith community nourished him in his awareness of a social justice-oriented spirituality. Educated in Harvard and Princeton, where he received his doctorate, his teaching career includes Princeton, Harvard, Union Theological Seminary, and University of Paris. Dr. West has never compromised on his social justice stand for institutional favors. He is known for his consistent, critical, prophetic voice for justice. In his teaching, preaching, and writing, he embodies passion for justice, everyday justice for everybody, period. Dr. West has written 19 books and edited 13 books. His influential book, Race Matters, Foregrounds an Inherent Problem of a Lack of Compassionate Spirituality in America, and critically examines the political, social, psychological, and economic usurping of a Black humanity. He makes numerous appearances on television and other platforms, speaking passionately on subjects ranging from racial justice and queer rights to climate justice. It is our privilege to listen to Dr. West and be drawn into that passion for justice and equity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Evangeline. Really appreciate that. And I must add that just as Mr. Pawar is a genuine leader of the people out on the streets, he's known as the street activist, Dr. West is one of the most humble and love-sharing intellectual leaders of our time. He has never refused to lend his influential presence and voice to stand in solidarity with Dalit matters. And thank you for that, Dr. West. I think since we were on the panel together at Brandeis with Dr. Thorat talking about Dalit issues, we have really built or started building a solidarity between Dalit and Black communities. We're counting on your continued support. So thank you. A very big thank you to both of you, to Mr. Pawar and to Dr. West. And so let's start our conversation. Without further ado, Mr. Pawar, can you briefly share your life story with us? Your childhood, where were you born? Tell us about your parents, your youth, some of the major social political influences in your life. How did you come to be the founder of Dalit Panther movement? We are here to listen to your story.
Jai Bhim to everybody.
Jai Bhim.
I am J.V. Pawar. In Marathi, I am writing by the name J.V. Pawar. I have not disclosed my full name to everybody, but only I will say that I have expelled Rama from my name. So I am J.V. Pawar, properly known in Marathi. And as you know, that I have written many books by name J.V. Pawar. I came from the same district from where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar comes. His district place is Ratnagiri district, that is in Maharashtra. And there's particularly the Konkan region from which he belongs and I also belong. So I am from that place where the ancestors of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, they were staying. So I am proud that I am from India, where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has taken the birth. I am proud that I am from the district, I am the state where Dr. Ambedkar has studied, and he has started the movement for the betterment or upliftment of the socially backward people. I am proud that I am from the same district from which Dr. Ambedkar comes. So, my village was a very remote area. Even the state transport bus never seen that thing. I was in such a remote area where I was fighting for the everyday, day-to-day. My village was having only education facility up to 4th standard. So after 4th, my mother decided that she had heard the name of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Only she was knowing that some Ambedkar, he is a barrister and he is fighting with the man like a Gandhiji. So she was of the impression that why my smallest son, because I am the smallest son, my elder 2 brothers, they were in service. They were fighting for their life. So she decided that my 3rd son should be educated. And of course, the first time I have seen Mumbai. About that time it is a Bombay. I came in Bombay. I was a very shy boy. I was not even meeting the people from my village. And then I have my father and my elder brother. They admitted me in a school which was far away from my staying place, because they were under this impression that the nearby schools were there, but they wanted that I should be engaged whole day, because otherwise I will spend my day with the other students. So my school was all the day. Let me tell you that though my mother or my relatives, they might have heard the name of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, but I have not heard his name. On 6 December 1956, when his death occurred, I was rather happy because of school. They got the that time it was school was closed for half a day, because the architect of our Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, was no more. That's why the school was kept half day closed. So I was rather happy that I will go to my student and I will play with them. I came to the and when I came, we were staying in such a room where almost all about more than 30 people, they were staying in one room only, because and they were all laborers in Mahanagar, corporation or BSP or some mill, cotton mill. So when they came on 6 December with the newspaper, because I was the only man who can read the newspaper. They were not able to read the newspaper. They used to bring the newspaper. That time the important newspaper was Acharya Maratha and Sandakal. They were the important newspaper, and they asked me to read out the newspaper. I was rather so shocked. I was reading the newspaper about the death of Dr. Ambedkar, and these people in front of me, they started crying. I wasn't aware why they are crying. Who was he? What is his relation with them? Because I was unaware of the working of Dr. Ambedkar, because I came from the remote area where the Ambedkar thought have never not heard. So first time I heard the name Dr. Ambedkar, and that is the people were crying, and I was reading the newspaper. So that particularly Dr. Ambedkar name was thrown in and from that day, I don't know why, but I started that my work should be as per the work done by Dr. Basa Ambedkar. I was not aware what he has done so far, but I was the area in which I was staying. That was the Ambedkarite area. Many second-rank leaders, they were staying there. I was also, I have joined the force of Samta Sainik then. That is the force of force regarding the equality, Samta Sainik then. So in that I also joined. And I have started, I was doing my Ambedkarite work also. And smoothly, I have decided that I should work for the upliftment of the people only. And the poverty was such that I could not educate in morning in day school. So my father, my brother, they have admitted me night school. So I have taken my education in night school, and during the day I used to do small type of work, whatever. Sometimes I was getting 2 annas, 2 annas or something. I was not getting much work, but I was by that way I was helping my family. And in the night school, I was studying from Maratha Mandir school was in Girgam area, where I passed my matriculation in first class. Man like me, that time to pass the first class was a rare thing. It was a very rare thing, and that too with the subject of English and mathematics, because students, they were even allowed not to take English and not to take even math. Without math and without English also, they used to be a matriculate or SSC. But I have, with the help with the subject English and mathematics, I got first class. And then I have started asking for the looking for the job and employment exchange, which was started by Baba Sahib Ambedkar itself. Employment exchange. This is this type of organization is started Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar when he was the labor minister. So that employment exchange was in existence, and we used to register our name there. I have registered my name in employment exchange, and I got many jobs because for them the student from first class, and that too with English and mathematics, it was a rare thing. So I got the many jobs. I was working in Bombay Telephone as a boy peon. There are 2 types of peon. One is boy peon. Below 18 they were called boy peon. Below 18 years they were called boy peon, and they were promoted as an office peon after the crossing 18 years. So when I crossed the 18 years, I promoted as the office peon. I got 15 rupees extra. And as I told you that many jobs, they were coming after me. I was not after them because of my first class and other I was getting this, and then ultimately when I joined the Bank of India because Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister, she has nationalized the banks, and because of the banks were nationalized, people like us, they were allowed to enter the bank premises. So I got the job in bank. When I joined the bank, I was getting 100 rupees less than what I was getting in Bombay Telephone. But I have decided to sacrifice even 100 rupees, 1,100 rupees. That time was a very important thing. But I have decided that my Bombay Telephone was a direct government of India's job and bank. bank, it was not a direct. So I decided, let me 100 rupees be less, but I will go for the bank where the government of India will not me to do my social work. So for social work or for the upliftment of my people, I have sacrificed that 100 rupees that time and I have joined the bank. And after joining the bank, I have now decided that I should work for my people only. In the 1960, there were many atrocities committed on the Dalit people. Every day when you open the newspaper, you will find something has happened somewhere. Even the atrocities, all type of atrocities. You cannot imagine what type of atrocities were there. But those are atrocities. They bunch us, and we have decided why we are only writing. We say that we'll fight for these atrocities. Why we should not come in the street? And that time, man like Raja Dare, Namdev Rasal, myself, we were the writer. And this Indira Gandhi, when the atrocity was the subject matter for all over India, she has appointed one study group whose name was Area Perumal Committee. And that Area Perumal Committee, they have gone to the around and they have consolidated the atrocity. If one atrocity is there, we will not get much effect on that. But all type of atrocity, if they are consolidated, and that it will be rather surprising thing. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pawar. That's such a powerful story right there. And I have ordered your book, so it should arrive in a couple of weeks. And I can't wait to read more about your life and your work. And thank you so much for your dedication at such a young age. I'm going to call upon Dr. West to, Dr. West, can you briefly describe your life journey as well? The deep influences that led you to become the strong action-oriented leader and for social justice and such a renowned intellectual.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you, my dear sister, for your leadership and each and every one of the persons who are here on this Zoom, because this is a very important coming together of international solidarity. It cuts across not just national lines, but of racial lines and religious lines and class lines and gender lines and sexual orientational lines. Put the real moral content and spiritual substance of our commitment to oppressed peoples, and specifically precious Dalits and precious Black people. And it spills over to other oppressed peoples as well. And for me to be on the same screen as the legendary P.V. Powers, I want to salute you, my brother. I must say, we've had long discussions of you going all the way back to those who actually introduced me to Ann Betker, my dear sister Ivy George, professor of sociology at Gordon College, who worked with Preston Williams, who was my mentor and her mentor, Brother Suraj, who I've spent some good time with there in Cambridge, with long discussions about the Dalit Panther Party, my dear sister Athena, coming out of Oakland, who was another powerful, powerful voice and figure. And so to be able to see you in the flesh, as it were, other than just the links on YouTube and so forth, read your work is just a blessing for me. Very quickly, though, I'm very blessed to be part of a West family and Shiloh Baptist Church, which are moments in the great ocean of a people struggling against hatred and greed and tear, which is the history of Black people for 400 years in the New World, from slave ship to slave auction to plantation to lynching tree to mass incarceration. All of these are moments of slavery, neo-slavery, of Jim Crow and new Jim Crow that had never been able to crush the spirit of the best of Black folk. And so in raising our voices, trying to be love warriors in the face of the hatred, and freedom fighters in the face of the terror, and wounded healers in the face of the trauma, and even joy spreaders in the face of the sorrow. I mean, the Louis Armstrongs and the Dizzy Gillespie's and the Sarah Vaughan's and Billie Holidays. They spread tremendous joy, even given the sorrow of what it is to have to wrestle with being subjugated and dominated, and despised and devalued. So I'm just a particular moment within that great tradition that's connected to Irene and Clifton West. I'll never be the human being that they were. That's my mother and my father. They both have passed now, but part of their afterlife lives in my life. Shiloh Baptist Church, which was right down the street from the Black Panther Party in Sacramento, California, that I worked very closely with the Black Panther Party. When I went to Harvard, I worked with their breakfast program for 3 years. I worked with their prison program. In fact, taught in Norfolk State Prison, where Malcolm X himself was first incarcerated in Boston. I couldn't join the party because they had a deep secular atheistic orientation that was profoundly anti-religious. I think it was very different than the Dalit Panther Party, where you had a number of Buddhists and others who were part of the movement. We could talk about that. But in the United States, there was a deep anti-religious sensibility, which I could thoroughly understand. It's just that I was going to always take my revolutionary Christian faith with me in whatever context I go into. And so they always understood, oh, there's Brother West. He's talking about he's a free man, but he's a Jesus-loving free Black man. Whereas we got over that Jesus mess. We're atheists, we secular, and so forth. And they was always my comrades, and we would have wonderful intellectual discussions about that. But they never really pushed me out, but I couldn't really become a member in that way. So I was never a member of the party. It had a deep, deep influence and will ever have an influence on me. But Malcolm, who of course I never met, that the Black Panther Party was sons and daughters of Malcolm X, as was noted in the presentation. Because Malcolm X, as a Muslim, and it's very important that when you look at the history of Black people in the United States, two of the freest Black men in the history of Black people were Muslims, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. And even Rakim, I think is the greatest hip hop artist, is a Muslim as well. Now, some people say Tupac, Biggie, we won't get into that right now. But it's interesting that that the Muslims have that kind of sizable stature and status in the history of a Black people who have been disproportionately Christian, very much so. And so when I encountered Ambedkar, I encountered a soulmate, because he was a free Dalit brother, brilliant Dalit brother, courageous Dalit brother, visionary at the deepest level. Now, of course, he got 2 PhDs. I mean, Malcolm was a street brother. He dropped out in 9th grade. Didn't have an A.B., M.A., PhD, and Becker got 2. Studying with John Dewey right here across the street at Columbia. But he never forgot where he came from. He was always connected to the best of his ROOTS, even as like an olive tree, whose roots are horizontal in order to facilitate a vertical leap. You see, that he's got strong ROOTS, but it's ROUTES, the routes that he took, global, international, but always empowering his humanity, his Dalit humanity, and his solidarity with the humanity of others. That's part of the correspondence between the great W.B. Du Bois and the great Ambedkar. I think this is, and there's no doubt in my mind that in the next 10, 15, 20 years, Ambedkar will be viewed as one of the greatest figures of the 20th century. As the world undergoes, it's not just decentering of European empires, but the decentering of the American empire. And so some of the truths that will surface, and so Brother Pawar and others will be truth tellers and witness bearers of a people who during the last 100 years or so, people tried to render their humanity invisible, but their voices, their figures, their creativity, their unbelievable courage becomes more and more visible and salient. I think that'll also be true in terms of Du Bois and the Toni Morrisons and the others. So in that sense, you know, part of my life is always inextricably linked to the lives of those who love me and those who have empowered me. And in Betker, in the last, I think I first taught a class on Betker about 25 years ago at Harvard, one-on-one with Sister Ivy George. And he has remained someone who is a very close soulmate, intellectually, spiritually, politically. And now I see his sons and daughters and his grandsons and granddaughters, his rich legacy, even as it spills over into the American empire as it undergoes its own decay and decadence, which we're wrestling with at the moment with the neo-fascism escalating, just as the neo-fascism in India escalating under Modi.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. West, for those beautiful thoughts connecting Malcolm X and Du Bois and Dr. Ambedkar. And they all did share a transformational anger. And I think Professor Angela Davis, for example, has expressed the feminist implications of Malcolm X's thought on framing a Black feminist activism, on that daring, you know, the daring spirit. Yeah. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn back to you, Dr. West. What characterized both the Black Panthers and Malcolm X was that unique combination, for a lack of a better word, a combination of a militant energy and an onward positive vision. So this combination, I believe, is what produced the dramatic momentum of those times. And soon thereafter, a new strand seems to have appeared in Black political and social thought, which you emphasize as Black nihilism. So for those who may not be familiar with the term, can you explain what it is, what dominant narratives have fashioned this origin and sponsored the continuation of Black nihilism, and how has it been registered over the last several decades? And can we use that to connect with larger, you know, global struggles, with Dalit struggles, those affected by neoliberalism? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Just very briefly, I appreciate that question. That I think Malcolm X represents a level of sincerity and integrity that takes the form of fearless speech, of frank speech, of unintimidated speech, of plain speech. And that kind of truth-telling is always a threat to the powers that be, whatever empire, whatever ruling class in the nation state, whatever patriarchal class, whatever group of elites that are trying to lie, hide, and conceal the suffering of other people. And then so Malcolm emerges at a moment in which the American empire is now the major empire in the world. It's after 1945, with the collapse of the age of Europe, the age in which the American colonial empires tried to reshape the whole world in their interests and in their image. So he emerges in the belly of the beast of the American empire with this unbelievable sincerity and honesty that everybody knows is going to get him killed. There'd never been anyone on US television, on the American public stage, who would speak so unflinchingly about the hate, the horrors and the tears and the hatred and the greed of the American empire. Even Martin Luther King Jr. and all of his greatness, he didn't have that kind of uncompromising militancy in his language. And then when the Black Panther Party comes along, and here's Huey Newton. Now, Huey Newton is the son of Reverend Walter Newton. He's the pastor of Bethel Baptist Church in Monroe, Louisiana. He was the baddest Negro preacher in that town. The police wouldn't touch him. So Huey's like his father, but it's a secular form as they make the move to California. And he reads Frantz Fanon. He reads Karl Marx. He reads critiques of predatory capitalism and connects the vicious white supremacist attacks on Black people with the atrocious consequences of a predatory capitalism that had started and targeted not in African slaves first, but indigenous peoples. So he's got a global view of how he can connect the struggles of Black people with other peoples who are being exploited and subjugated by predatory capitalism. So you get an anti-imperialism, you get an anti-white supremacy, and then he's also anti-patriarchy. And we know the essays on gay brothers and lesbian sisters that he wrote in the late 60s and 70s. In terms of sexuality, he's concerned with the humanity of everybody, but he has the same willingness to be frank and honest in public that Malcolm did of a younger generation. But not in a religious form. He doesn't have the Muslim sensibility of a Malcolm. No, not at all. He doesn't have the Christian sensibility of a Martin King. He's got a father who was a Christian minister, just like Malcolm had a father who was a Christian Baptist minister who was killed by the Black Legion, which is the Ku Klux Klan in Omaha, Nebraska. But Huey is secular. So was Bobby Seale. So was Erica Huggins. So was Elaine. The whole wave of folks. So was Sister Angela, who you mentioned before. She comes out of Birmingham, Alabama on the Christian side with her beloved family, but she's thoroughly secular by the time she gets to Brandeis. And we should acknowledge Brandeis has that beautiful statue of our dear brother Ed Betker. That's very significant.
Thank you so much for emphasizing the importance of that global perspective, and for Malcolm X to have modeled that for us to run with, I think is a very important reminder for us today. Thank you so much, Dr. West, for that. I'm going to turn to Mr. Pawar. Mr. Pawar, can you respond to Dr. West's thoughts in the context of Dalit struggles? Do you see Dalit communities in India giving up socioeconomic or political battles due to a crushing of, a sense of dignity or self-worth? How are they moving on? What gives them the strength? And in a recent interview, referring to the increasing political prisoners in India of Dalit rights and Muslim rights, including Father Stanley, who died, you said in that interview, it just seems that they are doomed to stay in jail. This government is scary, this government is revengeful. So what is scary? What is it seeking revenge for? What is the situation right now? What message do these arrests and unconstitutional legalizations of discriminations against minority groups in India, what does that mean today for Dalits in particular, and in the context of what Ambedkar's vision was as well?
Let me tell you that in India, the basic structure is the caste system. And whatever the problems are there, that is based on the caste system only. Even education, politics, social upliftment, education, all type of you will find the reason is behind that is the only casteism. And until and unless the casteism is eradicated, Dr. Baba Ambedkar in 1937 only, he said that the caste should be eradicated. But even if the caste is not annihilated, annihilation of caste was the subject matter of Baba Ambedkar in 1937. But till the date, the casteism is not. Even you will find that instead of annihilating the caste system, day by day, the casteism is being progressed in different way of life. Today, so we were working against this casteism only, because unless the casteism is not eradicated, the problem will not be solved. And for that we have decided to fight against the casteism, because and what was our intention? Dr. Baba Ambedkar has given the facility in the Constitution, and those facilities were not being implemented because of this casteism only. So during 1970, we were aware that this one organization like a Black Panther organization was working in America, and that Black Panther organization was fighting against the colored people, white and black. So we have decided that their problem is color is the problem for them. For us, the caste is the problem for us, and for against the casteism on the basis of the struggle fought by black people. Because that time we were knowing that from Time magazine, you used to come to India. From Time magazine, we used to know that Black Panther is working for the upliftment of the black people, and the two people. One is Mr. Bobby Seale and H.P. Newton. They have started the Black Panther movement, and they have fought like anything. So we have decided, in India also, why we should not work on the basis of Black Panther only. Our inspiration was the Black Panther, and in the street only, like the Bobby Seale and Newton, they established Black Panther in the street. There were two people. They have established this Black Panther. Here also two people, Namdev Rasal and J.V. Pawar. They have established the Dalit Panther in the street only, and we fought in the street only. And our fighting or our struggle, it was so globalized that the even government of Maharashtra, government of India, they were frightened. And in every step of life, we started for our struggle. About the today's opposition, if you ask me, that today, even after 2014, the new event, say BJP or Modi government, even today will say that again this whatever was against whom we were fighting, that again started coming up, and now the casteism is a subject matter for the today. And how to fight against this casteism is a problem for us. Even day to day, you will find the casteism is growing like anything. And let me tell you that all the political parties are responsible for this casteism. I say all political parties, including the political parties of those who are Ambedkar, you can say. These are all political parties. They are responsible for this upliftment for these people. So for us, our problem is only to fight against the casteism. I'm very happy that day to day, when the people will read about the Baba Saheb Ambedkar literature, they will come in the street, and today or tomorrow they will see. It may take some years together. It will take, but today or tomorrow we will find that India is a casteless India. Without caste, India is working. That is I cannot say that it is a dream, but it should come into existence that tomorrow the India will be casteless India. And if the casteless India come in existence, then only India can progress. Otherwise, India will not progress. This is what I say.
You're mute.
Keep forgetting that. Thank you so much, Mr. Pawar. So powerfully stated. Thank you. It's amazing that from the streets, then you went to learn from the United States Black movement, and kind of spreading it to a global awareness and a global struggle. And thank you for the warning and the wisdom that unless caste is abolished, we're not going to see justice anywhere. And the politicization of religion is a huge problem, as you pointed out. Thank you so much. Dr. West, in your famous book, Race Matters, you describe this country as a love desert. There is a famine of love, both internal, external. And in your foreword to the new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander book I love, you say that for too long, there has been no mass fight back against the multi-level assault on vulnerable peoples. And you beautifully remind us that Martin Luther King called us to be love-struck with each other. Not colorblind, but to care, to have compassion, to be considerate for all. And so you state that Alexander, along with so many writers and activists, promise us a democratic awakening where we say we do care. And Alexander adds that if we had actually learned how to love, care, and show compassion during civil rights movement, that probably we could have, reduced the mass incarceration today. And you reiterate saying that we need a revolution in our war priorities, quote unquote, and a transfer of power from the oligarchs to the people, that we are willing to live and die to make it so, end of quote. So Dr. West, what are you envisioning, hoping for as a mass fight back movement or revolution or a collaboration for us to work towards this democratic culture of caring for one another across caste and race lines?
Ooh, thanks for these wonderful questions, I must say. But I want to put in just quick narrative here. What happened to the legacy of the Black Panther Party and how we ended up where we are? You see, because you had mass repression. So many of the Black Panther members, 25 members, were killed, many incarcerated. Mumia Jamal still there. Sundiata just recently released. He's 85 years old. H. Rap Brown is still in Arizona, as he's now a Muslim imam and so forth. So you had massive repression with COINTELPRO, which was outright, not just authoritarian, but it was a fascist attack, a military attack on Black leadership that was critical in the legacy of the Black Panther Party. And what happened was it left then a void, and that void was taken up by liberal and neoliberal centrists who became the major Black spokesmen, as they were not just integrated into the American empire, integrated into predatory capitalism, integrated into a Wall Street-centered, Pentagon-centered capitalism, or in American imperialism in terms of militarism around the world. But those Black leaders, the Obamas and the others, became Black faces of the American empire. They became Black faces of the predatory capitalism. They certainly were signs of racial progress. There's no doubt about that. You have a Black president of American empire. That's serious progress in terms of dealing with racism, but it actually made the empire itself more acceptable. And it made the empire more legitimate, even as it continued to do its damage, as it dropped drones on precious human beings in Libya and Somalia and Pakistan and other places. The 800 military units all around the world still were doing the work of the American empire, the dirty work. AFRICOM still doing the dirty work. So that what happens is that the legacy of the Black Panther Party is projected in the media as spectacle, but its substantive legacy was crushed, and we experienced defeat, a relative defeat of the Black freedom movement. And that Black freedom movement more and more became a matter of becoming well-adjusted to injustice as you find a place in the white mainstream as a representative of Black progress when mass incarceration is taking place among Black poor and working class, massive unemployment, massive underemployment, massive dilapidated housing and dilapidated school system. So you ended up with the class system being reinforced. So as wealth inequality increased in the country, the wealth inequality within the Black community increased as well. And you didn't have Black leaders who loved Black poor people enough to tell the truth the way Malcolm did, to tell the truth the way the Black Panther Party, to tell the truth the way Angela Davis and others. There's no accident that Angela Davis ends up with an Ambedkar-like project, that her notion of abolitionism is connected to annihilation. In 1937, when Ambedkar talked about annihilation, he wasn't talking about a neoliberal version of caste. So you get more Dalits at the top. So you get more diversity of Dalits and non-Dalits and Brahmins and so forth, but India remains tied to its capitalist hierarchy, tied to its subordination and exploitative mechanism. No, that's not what Ambedkar was talking about at all. He talked about annihilation of caste. And that is a revolutionary democracy. He goes beyond his own teacher, John Dewey, in that sense. And so the answer to your question right now is that we're in a moment in which the neo-fascists are becoming stronger and stronger with Trump and company. were the neoliberals of Biden, who are very much supported by the Black community. There is no Biden in the White House without the Black vote. There is no neoliberal Democratic Party without the Black support. And for the first time in American history, you had the most progressive progressive community in America, which is the Black community, refuse to support the most progressive candidate for president, Bernie Sanders. That's unprecedented. For the first time in the Black community, we used to have a strong anti-war sensibility. But once you got a Black president who had 7 wars going on at the same time, but had the allegiance of the Black community, then the anti-war sensibility in the Black community got weaker. The anti-militarism got weaker. So when Martin King talked about militarism, poverty, racism, materialism, those are the 4 catastrophes that will ring down the curtain on the American empire. That's what Martin said in 1966, 1967, and 68, right? That legacy is weak. It's very weak. And it's partly because of the fact that what our dear sister Michelle Alexander, she's a student here at Union Seminary. We should just note that. He's my fellow colleague and freedom fighter as well, right here in New York. That what she was talking about was, here you get the most commodified country in the history of the world. That's what America is, market driven to the core. The business of America is business, making money, status, which has no spiritual content to it. It's just about making it. It's not about keeping the faith with the people. It's not about telling the truth. It's not about seeking justice. It's about making it. And more Black folk are captive to that spiritual emptiness as they become more successful with money, but find that their cousins are still very much locked into hoods and cells and shot down by the police and violated by the police and so forth. So that we're at a very, very crucial moment here. And of course, Buffalo was just one example of it. And one other point we should know here in terms of our dear sister Shireen, our Palestinian sister who was recently murdered by Israeli Defense Forces, we find out that it's hard to find Black leadership that wants to be morally consistent and tell the truth about the suffering of people everywhere, including Palestinians, because they're scared, they're afraid, they lack the courage, they want acceptance, they want approval in the white mainstream. And the white mainstream says, do not say a mumbling word about the suffering of precious Palestinians. And I think that's sick. I think that's morally decrepit. And it violates everything that Martin King, it violates everything that Malcolm X, it violates everything the Black Panther Party put forward in terms of morality and spirituality. And the same is true in terms of what we must learn from Frantz Fanon. Fanon said what? We don't know of a national bourgeoisie that has not in some way betrayed its own poor. And that's true for the Black bourgeoisie, that's true for the Dalit bourgeoisie, that's true for the Irish bourgeoisie, it's true for the Italian bourgeoisie, it's true for the Ugandan bourgeoisie, it's true for the Ghanaian bourgeoisie, it's true for the Black bourgeoisie in South Africa. That's Fanon's insight. That's what the Black Panther Party was founded on. We have to have truth tellers whose hearts, minds, and souls are in solidarity with those out of my Christian tradition, the least of these. That's part of the genius of Hebrew scripture. What you do for the oppressed is what you do for your sense of integrity. The hesed, the spreading of the steadfast love. What you do for the least of these, you do unto me, says Jesus. Now, you can take a secular form of it and say you're in solidarity for moral reasons, had nothing to do with religious scripture, and had nothing to do with God, nothing to do with Jesus, nothing to do with Muhammad, nothing to do with Amos or Esther. Fine, that's fine. Our secular comrades can go in that direction. But we're at a moment right now where the spiritual decay of the American empire is so intense that our Black leadership is running around scared and intimidated and afraid and doesn't want to tell the truth.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dr. West, for that. And I think you're so right in saying how, this black, leadership, black face of capitalism and empire and political, presence is a good distraction for everyone that was brought forth by, progressive liberals, I guess. So, and you're right, in this whole thing about truth telling, right? Truth telling. We need more and more of that. So we're lacking in that genuine truth telling, I think, because it's seen as a threat. And capitalism, of course, commodification, right? So our country, United States, we commodify everything, including motherhood. We have a Mother's Day, we have Valentine's, commodifying love, all kinds of things. And so, and the rest of the world buys into it. So capitalism, definitely, and neo-fascism that you mentioned, is something that we could identify with as a global struggle that we all can identify as a common enemy. Thank you so much. I want to hear the two of you talk about this. We may run over by about 6 minutes, if that's okay, past 9 o'clock, if that's okay with both of you.
That's fine. That's fine.
I want to hear both of you talk about this, where your thoughts are, because this is what I'm seeing happening, in the anti-caste movement in America. So here are my thoughts. So can we and do we need to liberate our struggles? This is different from seeking liberation from our struggles. I'm referring to liberating our struggles. And Dalit Panthers, provided us, with that assurance that Dalit is a casteless term. And I'm increasingly believing and convinced that we need to liberate our struggles in liberating our identities. As you just said, the global perspective, looking at Palestinian issues and every other issue in the world where people are being exploited, right? So the Dalit Panthers Manifesto defines Dalits as all those who are exploited politically, economically in the name of religion. And Mr. Martin McMahon, who's a known social activist in India, goes a step further to say that all those who are dedicated to social justice work could fall under the conceptualization of, being a Dalit. And I take that to mean that since the word Dalit means broken people, all those who are willing to break themselves, right? Break out of our comfort zones, break out of egotistic, hallucinations of supremacy. You mentioned white supremacy and so on. Allowing ourselves to be broken could be on that spectrum of a Dalit solidarity. And Dr. Beverly Daniels Tatum, I love her book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? She says at the core of our mission is the recognition that it will be necessary for people of color to embrace trust rather than suspicion. So a danger that I am seeing that continues today in India among global Indian diaspora is that along with the beefing of Hindu nationalism, pun intended, is the rising country club mentality among those of us formerly educated Dalits, that we choose to shut the door to working closely with those who have ancestry in caste communities. Either we run away from our Dalit ancestry or we hyper-articulate it and self-isolate, causing a phenomenon of kind of like a refractive stigma, right, against other social groups. So, and we've seen time and time and again that really does not work. So can you provide us with wisdom on liberating our identities? Is that essential? Like Becky Thompson says, is there a borderland where we can all meet and work together? It's for both of you to address, so whoever wants to.
No, dear brother, that's my dear brother.
Mr. Pawar, do you want to talk to that? Do we all need to come across caste lines and race lines to work together?
What? I could not get it. What do you say?
Is it important for us all to come together, to work together across race and caste differences?
Of course it is necessary. Of course it is necessary. We should unitedly work for this. And as I told you, that in other global area, caste is not in existence. In only India, caste is there in existence. So you people should help us to for the casteless, to prevent the casteless India. For this purpose, you people also should come forward for our help. And today or tomorrow, our dream should be that in India, the entire India will be cashless India. That should be our dream.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pawar. Thank you for those words of wisdom. Before we move into the Q&A session, so if you have questions, put it in the Q&A chat box. I do want to provide our panelists a minute's break. In that break, we're going to watch a rap video by a rap artist by name Vipin Thathat, who's an Ambedkarite rapper, and he's well known in India, and his rap song is very famous all over. He's won awards, and his rap song also appeared in the famous movie Jund. And Vipin is here with us also. I'm not sure if you're here, Vipin. If you are here, can you just say hi to us? Pranay, maybe you can pull up the rap video.
हजारों सालों से सह रहे हम चीख के दर्द को कह रहे यहाँ जात के नाम पे मार रहे हम मर के भी तुमको ना दिख रहे अबे कल का जातिवाद नहीं यहाँ अभी भी जातिवाद है तुम लेके उसका फायदा करते शोषण और राज तलवारों से काटते यहाँ पे पिछड़े दलित छोटी जात पुलिस पैरी टैली कारण पैसा और ऊंची जात हो ना जाए दोबारा यहाँ पे खैर लांची हत्याकांड ऊंच नीच छुआ छूता फिर से लाना चाहती आज की सच्ची बात बता रहा हूँ मैं आज की बात है ये गुजरात के कंटलाइस गाँव की ये मामला जमीन का ये जमीन दलित का उच्च जात कब्जा करके बोले जमीन है उसका उन्होंने रखी थी जमीन गिरवी कुछ मजबूरी थी उनकी पर हारे नहीं हिम्मत चुकाई फिर हिम्मत छुड़ाई जमीन जो गिरवी थी जमीन उनकी खुद की थी जो सर को ऊंचा रखती थी हाँ फिर भी हो रहा जुल्म फिर भी हो रहा खून बोलेगा इस पे कौन पूछेगा इस पे कौन बोलेगा इनकी पोल कौन बेटा हम ना झुकना पड़ेगा किसी के आगे ना मांगना पड़ेगा किसी से बिगड़ना बनना अब गुलाम हमें हम जीना चाहते आजाद भी वो हमला करते रोज सब झुंड में आते रोज पिस्तौल बंदूक डंडा और वार करते रोज भगाना चाहते वो दिखाना चाहते लोग पूरे पैसे दे के छुड़ाई जमीन फिर भी न माने वो क्योंकि पट्टा न दिल ऊंचा बने उनसे ऊपर और बुरी खबर ये है कि दलित फैमिली है अस्पताल में इतना मारा उनको अभी भी झुंड रहे अस्पताल में इतना हो कि सब पुलिस को अभी भी आया ना होश चौथी बार एट्रोसिटी लगी मुजरिम पे जो फिर भी आता तो घूम रहे जमानत पे मुजरिम लोग हाँ कैसे जी रहे तकलीफ में कितनी सह रहे कि खुद की जमीन पे कोई और राज कर रहे उठाई जो आवाज हमें ही झूठा कह रहे बना के झूठा केस हमें ही ये फंसा रहे फिर भी बोलते लोग जातिवाद नहीं है देश में यहाँ मूंछे रखने पर भी मार देते मेरे देश में मीडिया तो बिक गया जो दिखता नहीं न केस है इन जैसे लाखों दलित कितने तकलीफ में रह रहे मैं कहना चाहता हूँ कि न्याय मिली न सबको हम मिलके सब आवाज उठाओ बता दो ये सबको हम मांगने से मिलता ना तो छीन लो अपने हक को सब घोड़े बेच के सो गए तुम जगा दो इन सबको खड़े हैं इनके साथ हम आएगा कौन हाँ लड़ेंगे इनके साथ हम आएगा कौन हाँ खोलेंगे इनकी पोल हम मिलके सब चेक
you for that, for playing that, Pranay, and thank you, Vipin, for your talent sharing that with us. Dr. West, I just realized that I did not give you the opportunity to answer the question of the importance of liberating our identities and working together.
Well, one is that I think if we dig deep in the best of our histories, we'll find great examples of individuals and institutions and movements from which we could learn much. And so there's a sense in which we liberate ourselves from our movements by acknowledging our movements have always had a variety of different voices. And we try to be in contact with the most courageous, compassionate, and visionary voices. So we lost the moment of Dalit Black solidarity in the 1960s with Martin King. As great as Martin Luther King was, his preoccupation with Gandhi meant that he missed out on having an organic connection with Ambedkar and the legacy. So that he presented to America all this talk about Mahatma Gandhi, and Gandhi's got his own greatness, but he's got some severe limitations and blind spots. And so Martin King, with all of his authority, projects this understanding of what the Dalit people are all about through Gandhi's eyes. But that was a mistake. That was a missed opportunity. So we can't do that. We can't do that again. The same is true when he went on to talk about a Dalit. As much as we have Dalit Black solidarity, We still got indigenous peoples in India whose humanity also must be embraced. In the name of what? The same morality, the same spirituality. That doesn't dilute our Dalit Black solidarity at all. It embraces all of those who suffer, all of those who are being rendered invisible. Why? Because the Dalit are a great people. And Ambedkar is just the peak of the iceberg. You got nameless and anonymous Dalits who are great people, just like my grandparents. And Black folk are great people. And this is at our best. We got Black gangsters, you got Dalit gangsters. You got Black sellouts, you got Dalit sellouts. That's a human thing. But we're talking about our best. And so we begin with Dalit moral, spiritual greatness. Black moral, spiritual greatness. And then that solidarity would embrace it, Palestinians and Guatemalans and Bolivians. And so when the Jews are catching hell, we embrace them as well on moral and spiritual ground. It's a human thing. And this is what I think Ambedkar taught us at a very, very deep level, in the same way that that Martin King and Malcolm X and Angela Davis and Toni Morrison and others.
Yes. You're so right in saying, there have been so many lost opportunities in history because some of our political leaders just didn't see that, didn't have the courage, I think, to trust everybody, as you put it. So thank you so much, Dr. West, for that. So now we are really turning to the Q&A session. So I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Prachi Patankar, who is actually a legacy in herself. Her mother was one of the first American, so to speak, Dalit rights activists who went to India and just gave her entire life, who recently passed away. And her father is a well-known Dalit activist in Maharashtra. So Prachi, over to you to lead us through this Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Roja, and it's an honor really to be in this space and with Zawi, I'm going to say it Marathi way, Zawi Pawarji and Dr. Cornel West. Thank you so much, and just to bring in both the conversation about annihilation of caste and the abolition framework was, I think, really important, and really thinking about going forward on these particular forms is extremely important, because it's questioned so much that we have the ability and the possibility of doing that, both the abolition and annihilation in both the Indian context and the US context. So thank you so much for putting that out there and reminding us of the dreams. I'm going to start with, I have so many questions, but I'm going to start with the questions that are in the chat. So one of the first questions I see here is by Radha Kinkari, and she's asking the fact that Dr. West and Dr. Anderson Rajkumar, others draw on the religions as inspiration for liberation and social justice. J.B. Pawar sir, on the other hand, has deleted Ram, which is seemingly religious name from his own name. And there are many out there who argue that religion, no matter how we may try to interpret texts, reinterpret them, and oral narratives for our own social justice purposes, is in fact very strong force of oppression. Certainly for women, we can see how that is true just on the face of it. So would the panelists here say that at some point in the near future, religion will be completely phased out of social justice and liberation movements and conversations? So that's a question. Or do any of you see religion continuing no matter, or maybe even gaining more influence, or religion or spirituality?
It's an open question. History is a mysterious thing. It depends on what religious people do. As long as you have Malcolm X's in the world, then you're going to have some prophetic Muslims who will be part of any liberation struggle. As long as you have Fannie Lou Hamers, you're going to have some revolutionary Christians who are part of that. As long as you have Rabbi Heschel, you're going to have some very prophetic Jewish folk. It depends on what religious people do. Institutional religion is always in its dominant form accommodating to a status quo. We see it with the Russian Orthodox Church, with Putin's criminality vis-a-vis Ukrainians. You know, they putting the sprinkling on the bombs. Well, Christians have done that. Hindus have done that. Buddhists have done that. Followers of Judaism have done that. So institutional religion across the board tends to accommodate to empire and patriarchy and any status quo of capitalism. But there's always a prophetic slice of Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, a prophetic slice that says that we, in our understanding of our religious tradition, like our Hindu brothers and sisters who say, we want to be with Ambedkar, right? We don't have to become Buddhists, that we want to annihilate caste and remain a Hindu. Well, that's a prophetic impulse within Hinduism. We see it at work today. Now, some people would say it's impossible. Well, some people say to me, it's impossible to be a revolutionary Christian, Brother West. If you really want to be revolutionary, give up on Jesus, give up on Christian faith. Well, we got to work that out. I'm still convinced that I could be part of my tradition. And I bring that tradition with me. But if we reach a point where, you know, vast numbers of religious folk across the board become accommodators to vicious forms of oppression, then yes, it needs to be called into question. Absolutely. But we haven't reached that point yet. We haven't reached that point yet. And of course, we also know our secular brothers and sisters who become Marxists. Can they fall into arrogance, corruption, and so forth? Of course they can. What about our communist brothers and sisters? Can they fall into corruption and domination? Of course they can. And we say, well, it's a human thing. No matter what tradition you have, you're going to have folks who are falling into corruption, falling into accommodation to the powers that be. And if that's the case, then we got a very different way of looking at religion versus non-religion. We're really looking at human beings tied into any tradition.
There is a question in the chat box, Praj.
Yeah. So I think there was a question from a viewer not here, another space, about, and I think this is an important question for so many of us, is, you know, as we wage these struggles both for and with marginalized people, how can we center psychological trauma and mental health in our strategies and organizing approaches, since it affects, so, you know, what is the role of wellness and well-being, and as we connect and address the psychological trauma that so many marginalized and oppressed communities face. So I'm wondering, would you, who would like to take that? Were you able to understand? Are you here? You'll be able to hear the question, Pawar sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell me the question.
So, you know, there is so much trauma, and in these, as we struggle and organize around this, especially oppressed caste and oppressed people everywhere, how do you think about addressing the psychological trauma and that affects our mental health as you resist? How do you kind of deal with that in your strategies?
The social upliftment is more important. And for the social upliftment, the people from literature and other fields, their participation is important. And I'm of this opinion that unless and until they participate for eradication of caste system, nothing will happen. This is my again, I'm briefing you that the eradication of casteism is the foremost important question for the Indian people, we Indian people. That's all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when you look at the history of Dalit joy, and Dalit love, Dalit community, and Dalit jubilation. These are already ways in which Dalit people, given all of these hundreds of years, have looked trauma in the face and still come up with a way of fighting it. And we build on that. We don't have to imitate that. And the same is true with Black people. We've come up with Black joy, and Black love, and Black community, and Black jubilation as a way of pushing back the trauma, even though the trauma is always already inside of us, so that we can still gain access to something that the trauma is trying to crush. The trauma is trying to crush our joy. Do we have Black people full of joy? Do we have Dalit people full of joy? Absolutely. They tried to crush Dalit dignity. Just look at Brother Pawar. Look at his dignity. Look at his grace. Look at his style. The Dalit, the Brahmanism, Brahmin supremacy could not crush that out of him. So it's there, and we build on that, you see. They try to do it with me. They try to crush my joy. No, never. I'm going to the grave with Black joy, because I come from a people who keep producing joy. And that's a way of pushing the trauma back, at least for a moment. And that's why we need each other. It's not just Dalits and Dalits, it's Dalits and others. Dalits and Dalits and Dalits and others. It's not just Black and Black, it's Black and others and Black and Black. That's what makes our international solidarity so important.
Thank you. Yeah, and the music that we're also bringing in today is also
absolutely our dear artists that we had, and the arts in general, the music, but also the ways in which Dalits musicalize time and space, the way in which Black people musicalize time and space. There's a musicality in their way of being in the world before they even make a sound.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. West. I just want to quickly add that I think more and more, the supportive networks are kind of failing and falling in a capitalist society, because there is an increased demand in meeting, economic need. The social stresses are increasing. So I think, seeking these professional resources of help is becoming very expensive. And I see so many of my students as well struggling a lot with this, with this sense of self-worth. And I mean, using examples, using such occasions to look at examples like Malcolm X and, Dr. Pawar and yourself and so many others who've been able to sort of overcome. And we want to learn more, right? And read more about how you guys are doing it. But thank you for that. Do we have more questions, Prachi?
Yeah, we do. And also Dr. Gawi has a question that I believe he's not able to type in the chat. So if we want to ask him to just ask directly.
Yeah, I think we'll do just one more, and then Biju wants to provide some final comments, and then we can wind up. Yeah.
Okay. Is somebody able to unmute Miss Dr. Gawi?
And then he needs to keep it brief. Mr. Gawai, thank you. And can you just keep it brief, please? Thank you.
Yes. I would like to arise the questions about that. In a global economy, there is a largely polarizations of the Dalit as well as the Black, and having a suffering from the caste matter as well as the Black matter, and economical inequality and social inequalities being happening, rising so many very high. What will be the policy adopted by our community, as well as how we can create the pressure before the international level to upliftment of the Dalit as well as those who are downtrodden in all over nations? What will be the policy and what we can do about to create pressure to abolish the inequality, economical as well as the social? What will be the policy and how we can be arise to the pressure? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a crucial question, though. It's a crucial question. I think it's no accident that Martin Luther King Jr. and Martin King were coming together We know this from the FBI files of June 1964. They planned to come together to bring the United States before the United Nations for the violation of the human rights of Black people. Would have been the first time they worked together. And one of the ways in which Dalit Black solidarity could take on an international stage would be to bring the issue of caste and bring the issues of Dalits more explicitly, not just before the United Nations, but international bodies with a variety of voices, so that it has repercussions on the national governments, because we know casteism itself is increasing in the Western Hemisphere, in the United States and other parts of the New World. How do we push that back? And then most importantly, how do we speak to the needs of the plight of our precious Dalit brothers and sisters in India from that international stage? So that's one thing that might be done. We talk about this in the class that we teach at Union. I'm blessed to teach with my dear brother, John T. John, we call him John T. He's a wonderful, wonderful professor. And we've had Brother Moses and Brother Arvin and Brother Samuels, who are all Dalit graduate students with us. And what do? We come up with both deep philosophical questions, but also policy-oriented things that we can do together that has some impact on the lived experience of Dalits.
Thank you. Prachi, do you think we can hand it over to Biju right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's many more questions. So
yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time.
Yeah.
Thank you all for the questions. Dr. West, I'm going to hand it over to Biju Matthew, who you probably know. I think he knows you know him, one of the very foremost, taxi drivers union leaders in New York City. And he's also one of the founders of India Civil Watch International, well-respected, activist, scholar / everything for us. So over to you, Biju, for your final comments.
Thank you very much, Roja and Jabim, Lal Salam, and revolutionary greetings to J.B. Pawar, sir, and to Dr. West. I think this panel has been so rich that I don't believe that it needs a particular kind of comment at the end. I just want to express my deepest gratitude to both Pawar, sir, and to Dr. West for being here with us. The one thought I will leave everybody with is that the crisis of capitalism as it evolves, and we know that we are running into a set of humongous contradictions that will get resolved, whether it gets resolved in the direction of fascism, chaos, global chaos and destruction, or whether it'll get resolved in the direction of liberation is the big, huge question. And this is a twin crisis of both a capitalism that is, that has produced the kind of inequality it has, and the capitalism that has produced the kind of ecological and climate crisis that it has. In that context, I really do want to ask the question, the future as it gets defined by progressive forces with the leadership of the oppressed people, the Black communities, and the anti-caste communities, the Dalit communities across the world. There's a particular kind of new dialogue, a new conversation that's required across these communities. And I think while public panels of this sort are important in framing some of these issues, I think more quiet conversations wherein we sit across tables and try and chart out those moments, like the moment when the Dalit Panthers were created, like the moment when the Black Panthers were created, that kind of moments of imagination and great imaginary. I think those are the moments that we need to be looking for. And I mean, especially with the diasporic communities from India, as Dr. West and Dr. Pawar said, the anti-caste identity is so fundamental, and the struggle against white supremacy here is so fundamental that I think it's really crucial that over the next few weeks, next few months, it'll be good to see if we can do a follow-up to this panel by sitting down with Dr. West and with Dr. Pawar and really talking this through in terms of some new connections that can be made and new imaginaries that can be built up. Thank you so much. That's just a kind of a provocation towards a future conversation that I hope that we'll be able to carry out here in New York and in Mumbai. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Biju.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that one-on-one, intimate, around the table conversation can go a long way in terms of really building. This is what we want to get out of this, connecting this historic moment of connecting Mr. Pawar and Dr. West, who've never met each other. And I think this is historic that this could happen. And thank you for everybody who made this happen, today. And, as Biju mentioned, we would love to have a follow-up conversation on this. Really, really appreciate all the time and the energy and the dedication that both of you embody, to me personally, inspiring me, and to so many individuals in this world who are drawing that strength from you all. So really grateful for that and for this conversation. And again, happy birthday to Malcolm X. May his legacy live on. And happy birthday to the Dalit Panthers, and congratulations, Mr. Pawar. And we really bow to you for the way in which you have carried this with nothing, from nothing, right? And for the, for this, fire that you light in all of us. And back the same thing with Dr. West as well. I know that so many young Black people and so many others throughout the world draw strength from an example that you set, in terms of not being up there, but you're just so down to earth in the way you relate to people and the way you connect to ideas on a day-to-day level. And you modeled that for us so beautifully. Thank you so much for that. And those of you who want to stay on can stay on. We're going to watch a little video that was made on I think you're making a series of videos, but this is one little video on the Dalit Panther movement that a young leader in India is sharing her thoughts. Those who need to leave can leave. This is about 4 minutes. So thank you, everybody. Jai Bhim, and more power to all of us.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Pranay, are you going to play this?
Yeah, I am very much thankful for the organizers because first time I am meeting Dr. West. I read about his some book I read. I have seen his interview about this. But first time I am meeting him. I am very much thankful for this to the people who have organized this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. West, sorry, would you like to say some closing comments? I'm so sorry that I didn't.
No, I think that our dear brother from New York and yourself and the one and only, the great, our dear brother Powers himself has said all that needs to be said. But I think this last word with this video, especially coming out of the younger generation, is a beautiful way to go out on. Thank you so much. I'm just so blessed to be here.
Pranay, just 1 second. I always forget this. I want to thank Pranay Somajula, who's working with Hindus for Human Rights, for working with me closely in putting this together, all the tech aspects and the emails and the links, which I could never do. And I want to thank Partha Chakrabarti for India Civil Watch International, Dada Sahib Thandali for putting us in touch with Mr. Pawar and for working with me on this, all our co-sponsors, all the participants today who read, Sara, Vikas, Evangeline, Prachi, Biju, Sirisha, everybody. Thank you. Over to the video.
कि जो दलित पैंथर के बारे में अगर ये बहुत अच्छी मूवमेंट रही थी कि जिस टाइम पे भारत के अंदर ये बोला जा रहा था कि भारत के अंदर सबको आजादी मिल गई, उस टाइम पे भी कास्ट के आधार पे मतलब एक ऐसी कैटेगरी के अंदर लोगों को बांट दिया जाता है, ऐसी जानवरों की तरह उनसे बिहेव किया जाता है। तो वो 25 साल बाद भी वो दिख रहा था, और आज भी वो ऐसे की ऐसे ही मतलब है, जिसके अंदर की लोगों को मतलब अनटचेबिलिटी चाहे आज कुछ एरिया में कम हुई है, लेकिन वो शोषण का एक तरीका बदल गया है। लेकिन वो मूवमेंट अभी दोबारा ऐसा ही मूवमेंट खड़ा होना चाहिए, मुझे लगता है, क्योंकि लगातार ऐसी घटनाएं अभी भी बंद नहीं हुई हैं। वो देश के आजादी के 25 साल बाद वो मूवमेंट खड़ा हुआ था, लेकिन आज और 70-75 साल के बाद भी वो घटनाएं जो ठीक नहीं हुई हैं। लगातार देख रहे हैं कि जो महिलाएं हैं, दलित महिलाएं हैं, हर रोज उनके साथ रेप हो रहे हैं। जो दलित जो लोग हैं, जो थोड़ा बहुत कुछ भी थोड़ा ऊंचा नीचा बोलते हैं, या फिर ये बोल देते हैं कि हमें ज्यादा दिहाड़ी दी जाए, या फिर अपनी मजदूरी की मांग करते हैं, तो उनको मतलब मार दिया जाता है, शरेआम पीट के मार दिया जाता है। यहाँ पे कुंडली के अंदर भी हम लोगों ने देखा है कि यहाँ पे जब हम लोग को पकड़ा गया तो पुलिस के द्वारा ये बोला जाता है कि आप लोग दलित हो, आप लोग चमार हो, चूड़े हो, आप लोग कोई हक नहीं बनता है कि आप पुलिस के खिलाफ, पुलिस के सामने खड़े होके बोलो, बड़े बड़े फैक्ट्री मालिकों के सामने बोलो। तो वो हम लोग को तो सच में जो दलित पैंथर मूवमेंट इतना बड़ा खड़ा हुआ था कि जो दलित नौजवान थे, जो लोग थे, उन्होंने बड़ी संख्या में इकट्ठा होकर लोगों को मतलब उस जो गुलामी से छुटकारा दिलाने के लिए एक मूवमेंट खड़ा किया था। और सच में वो हम लोग चाहते हैं कि ऐसा ही मूवमेंट दोबारा से खड़ा होना चाहिए, ताकि हम लोग जो सबसे बड़ी आबादी है, जिनको दलित के नाम से मतलब मारा जाता है, तो हम लोग इसीलिए उनको दलित मतलब अगर माना जाए कि दलित हमें भी नहीं बोलना चाहिए, लेकिन जब दलित शब्द जिन्होंने दिए हैं वो दलित शब्द बोल के मारेंगे, तो उस टाइम पे दलित शब्द बोलना जरूरी हो जाता है। हाँ, हालांकि हम ये मानते हैं कि किसी भी इंसान की कोई जात, कोई धर्म कुछ नहीं होता है, लेकिन जब एक मुस्लिम को मुस्लिम समझ के मारा जाएगा, मुस्लिम बोल के मारा जाएगा, तो उस टाइम में मुस्लिम बोल के उसकी जाति लेना ज्यादा जरूरी है। उसी तरीके से दलितों के लिए भी अभी जरूरी है कि देश के हर कोने के अंदर उनके साथ जो मारपीट हो रही है, ऐसी ऐसी घटनाएं हो रही है जो कभी न्यूज़पेपर के अंदर नहीं आती है, ऐसी घटनाएं हो रही है जो कभी भी लोग मतलब शहरों के अंदर, जो बड़े बड़े कॉलेज यूनिवर्सिटी के अंदर लोग नहीं जानते हैं। यहाँ पे कुंडली की अगर मैं हालात बताऊं तो, क्योंकि मैं पूरे देश के तो मैं नहीं बोल सकती हर जगह पे क्या क्या घटना घट रही है, मैं कुंडली के बारे में बताना चाहती हूँ कि यहाँ पे बहुत सारी यूनिवर्सिटियां हैं, अशोका यूनिवर्सिटी है, जिंदल यूनिवर्सिटी है, अम्बेडकर यूनिवर्सिटी है, और भी बहुत सारी यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं जहाँ पे बहुत एलीट क्लास के बच्चे पढ़ते हैं, फिर मिडिल क्लास के बच्चे पढ़ते हैं, जिनके थोड़ा बहुत ठीक होता है घर का हालात। लेकिन उसी यूनिवर्सिटी के बाहर इतने ज्यादा मजदूरों के हालात खराब है कि वो बहुत छोटे छोटे घरों के अंदर रह रहे हैं, जितना हमारा बाथरूम होता है उसी जगह पे वो अपना खाना बना रहे हैं, उस जगह पे सो रहे हैं। इतने बुरे हालात हैं, वही नाली के अंदर उनके बच्चे खेल रहे हैं, और लोग उस बस्ती के अंदर जाना भी अच्छा नहीं समझते हैं। वो सिर्फ फैक्ट्री के अंदर जाते हैं, माल का उत्पादन करके देते हैं, सिर्फ इतनी ही उनकी जिंदगी है। पहले दास हुआ करते थे, जो मालिक का काम था कि उनको जिंदा रखना, उनको अच्छा खाना देना ताकि वो मर ना जाए। लेकिन अभी तो ये है कि अगर कोई मर जाता है उसकी जगह दूसरा इंसान रख दिया जाता है, ताकि इतने बेरोजगारी है, इतने लोग हैं, तो उनको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है। तो इसलिए जरूरत है कि जो जैसे दलित पैंथर सिर्फ और सिर्फ कास्ट को लेकर नहीं लड़ रहे थे, वो लड़ रहे थे कि जो पूंजीवाद है इसके खिलाफ लड़ रहे थे।
That was powerful. Prachi, who's Kaur, Nodeep Kaur?
Yeah, thank you. I just posted. So Nodeep Kaur is a young Dalit labor rights leader in India, and she was, I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, so she was put in jail for fighting for the rights of people who who are working in the factory, and she works with the labor rights in India. And so because she was put in jail, Meena Harris here had posted about her, tweeted about her, and then they started burning her. They started burning both Meena Harris's photo and Nodeep Kaur's photo all across India because Meena Harris posted a photo about her. So she became, she became well known for her bravery and being in jail and fighting for the people, but also became well known in the U.S. because she was tweeted and really trolled across social media as well. But she's just an amazing young leader that continues to do the work that's needed to be done. And in solidarity with the big farmers movement that happened recently in India too. So.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is exactly why the anti-caste movement is so important, because so many lynchings, right? So many lynchings, arrests that are happening in India, lynching of Muslims, Dalits, Adivasis, journalists, activists, everybody. So it is, a pandemonium in India right now. And I think as the Indian diasporic community and the Black community, if you come together and strategize, we can take this forward in making India accountable. And casteism is here in the United States spreading rapidly. We saw that in the Cisco case in California. A Dalit employee was discriminated against. The Baptist Temple in New Jersey hired Dalit laborers from India, trafficked them, brought them here, paid them $1 a day. I mean, all these kinds of casteism is spreading everywhere. Unless we join together as a global community across religious, caste, race lines, we really cannot move forward. So thank you for all of you for your dedication. And on that note, we shall stop, I guess.
And we thank you, our dear sister. We thank you. Wonderful.
Thanks to everybody.
Yes, sister.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye, Mr.
you,
Pawar. Go
Roja.
have your breakfast. Yeah. Have your idli and chutney.
Thank you all, JB.
Love you all. Bye-bye.
Love you, love you, love you.
Good night.